Hi, I'm Anthony Henry. Welcome back to America's Ass. We are on episode 4. This is episode 31, season 4, episode 31. Yeah, we've been gone for about a month and a half, I'd say, trying to let some headlines catch up on us, so we got stuff to talk about. But I'm really excited. You probably noticed the new intro we have. That was a job well done by our editors. And first of all, I just want to say, today is solely going to be about school government. I realize that as of today, the primary was yesterday for the presidency. Spoiler alert, both people we thought would win won. So we'll save that for next week. Not much to go over there. But anyway, introducing our guest today, Jim O'Connell. So please take a minute to introduce yourself.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you and you know, being in front of the people of Derry.
All right. So Jim is the vice chair of the Manchester Board of School Committee.
That's correct. The chair is the mayor chair, so the vice chair is effectively operates as the liaison and in the role of the chair mostly. So yeah, I've been there. I run at large in the city of Manchester, so I represent all 12 wards, and this is my third term that I started. I started on the 1st of January, 2nd of January. So.
All right. So I guess before we get into like issues that both boards are facing, I think it might be interesting to talk about how each of the boards themselves are different. So I'll start with Derry. Derry we have half as many as you do. We have 7. All 7 of them are at large. They're nonpartisan like yours are. Typically we have, they're staggered. So like for example, this year we have 2 seats up. Next year we're going to have 3. The following year the other 2. They're all nonpartisan. I do know where they all stand on party, but they do a fairly good job of keeping party out during the meetings. Outside of the meetings, it gets iffy. But yeah, obviously everyone knows I'm on the school board myself. I'm the student member, and it's been an interesting experience, especially with all the controversy going on.
I bet. Well, I can do the quick sort of intro to the Manchester. We have 14 members on the Board of School Committee in Manchester. We have 12 wards, so we've got 1 representative from each ward, and then we have 2 at-large positions, and I'm one of the 2 at-large. There's no great distinction between the authority of the 14 members. The at-large members are not super members. They simply represent all the wards across the city and are elected by everybody, and then each of the other 12 represents their own ward. We have student members. We have quite a few now because we have student members on our board, and then we have student members on all our committees. So that's been a very important innovation, and it's been great to hear student voice. And even if there were doubters there in the past, I think when you see what the students bring to the board, it actually, they've silenced whatever doubters they might have had. In our case, our board is elected every 2 years. It is not staggered. And just as an observation, I would say that we did a strategic plan for education, which was very important, foundational, 3-4 years ago. And one of the things that came from it was the overview was that probably the Board of School Committee in Manchester was bigger than normal. The average is between 5 and 7 across the United States. The other thought was that they being staggered. The challenge is in Manchester, once you have 1 member from each ward, nobody sort of wants to give up a ward, right? So, and in my case, I don't want to spend time or political capital or energy on, a good governance thing, albeit that we have work to do in improving schools, education, delivering value for taxpayers, and making sure our kids are getting a good education. And if we had lots of extra cycles, we could and should probably deal with the governance issue over time.
Yeah, and speaking of the staggered terms, by the way, today is the 24th. I just want to point out that the filing period to run starts today, and it runs until February 2nd. So if you live in Derry, think about that. So yeah, and some things that I should add to mine, we have 7, and the chair is elected within the board, and they're all 7 are at large, so there's no real districts. The town council has districts. Our town council has 4 districts and 3 at large.
Okay.
But yeah, the school board, the chair and the vice chair and the secretary are elected within the board.
Right. Our vice chair, I'm elected within the board.
Yeah.
The chair is by de facto the mayor, and the mayor, of course, is elected. If I could do one thing, I'd like to do one thing as we're beginning this. A good friend of mine was on the Derry Board of School Committee for 3 or 4 cycles back about 8 or 9 years ago, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And so I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Ken Lenihan and the Lenihan family here in Derry. So, hi guys. So,
Actually, now that I think of it, Mrs. Linehan was the school nurse at South Range School.
she still is.
That's where I went. So,
Wonderful lady, yes. If you want a good advert for school nurses and for wonderful people in Derry, then Sue Lennon's the way to go. So I'll probably get a free coffee out of that before the end of the week or something. But
well, getting into the actual things that are going on within the school board, I guess we'll start with Manchester, because
Right.
I feel that's a much larger, literally, because the school district itself is much, much larger than Derry.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah, just give a basic rundown on the whole restructuring.
Yeah, so we're looking at, so I mentioned the strategic plan. So I think it was 2020, we passed a strategic plan, which had taken a number of years to develop. And that was done by an organization called Manchester Proud, which really was an umbrella organization made up of philanthropies, charities, cultural associations, parents groups, business, the Chamber of Commerce, sort of as broad spectrum as you could get. And they spent just over 2 years going out. They did outreach and people with clipboards, visiting doors, doing meetings in the community, lots of work. And they developed a strategic plan. So without that strategic plan, that's your North Star, that's your guide, and so it's been very important for the board that we now know what we're trying to do. Now we can disagree all night about how we get there, but we know how we're trying to get there. More recently, we began the process. We brought in, we sent out an RFP, a request for proposals for a master planning company. We narrowed it to one. We chose a company called SMMA. That process, we're spending currently about $1.6 million on a long-term plan for the school buildings for the city of Manchester. We had, 4 years ago, we had 22 schools, 4 high schools, 4 middle schools, and 14 elementary schools. 2.5, 3 years ago, we closed Hallsville, one of the oldest schools in the state, a 19th century school. So that leaves us today with 13 elementary schools. Our long-term plan has us reducing to 12 elementary schools eventually. Most immediately, we are about to close Wilson Street School, which also is a 1890s building. That elementary school is closing, so we'll be down. When that closes, we'll be down to 12 elementary schools. As part of that, so we're closing that. We are moving the students, the K through 4, into modular classrooms at 2 of our elementary schools, Beach and McDonough. And then we will begin work on building a new elementary school. It'll be the first new school building in Manchester since 1997-98. So that school is planned. We plan to open that in 2027. And so at that point, that'll be a larger school, 650, 700 kid elementary school. We're also in the process, if you bear with me, we have 4 middle schools. So we have put our 5th grade into our middle schools. Half of them are there right now and half are not. So we're putting the last of the 2 middle schools into 5 through 8. And so we're building extensions, roughly 30,000 square feet or so extensions, maybe more and less than some, at each of our 4 middle schools, and we're reconfiguring them entirely inside. So we're spending about $200 million on the reconfiguration of those 4 middle schools. The plan is to spend $72 million on the new high school because of it's going to be the new elementary school at Beach Street. And then we have another 20 or so we're spending on modulars to facilitate it. So the whole plan comes to $306 million, of which the city will bond $290 million. And one of the important things is we're doing that, we're able to do that without breaking the tax cap and staying within the tax cap. So that's the quick version. There's a lot more, as you can imagine.
Yes, I've tried to keep tabs with what Manchester's been doing as much as possible, simply because of how many similarities there are to Derry, so I'm trying to see what neighboring districts are doing. But one thing I'll bring up before we get into Derry was, I believe a week or two ago, the Board of Aldermen put a pause to it. So
Well, they did, just if I could correct you, they sent a motion, they passed a motion and sent it to the Board of School Committee saying that, whatever words they want to use for a pause, that as they were told in non-public by their attorney, that was not something they were able to do. They have no authority to do it, and I didn't come to Derry to, increase any tension in Manchester, but there is no pause happening. I get there was a big change on our board of aldermen. I think a lot of aldermen needed to get up to speed with and to learn what was going on. So we're going to honour we're not going to honour the request for a pause. We're not pausing. What we are doing is our joint committee, which is 3 members of each board. Our joint building committee is meeting on January the 30th, and immediately after that, in the days following that, we'll be convening a meeting of both boards. And at that point, we'll have SMMA, the long-term planning, the administration, our staff, and we're going to spend as long as it takes to ensure that our aldermen have a full, robust understanding of what the plan is and what we're doing. And ultimately, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen does have a big control here, because the Board of Mayor and Aldermen gets to decide our budget. So, and once the budget is passed, then the Board of School Committee has complete authority over how that is spent, where it is spent, and that's based on state statute, as also in city charter, but it's based on state statute that's the way in which things happen. So I'm looking forward to there being some collegiality. I came hot foot here today from a meeting with one of those new members who had some questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing some cooperation, and that we're able to drive forward. One other thing is with the aldermen, the other control the aldermen have is that for us to build we're proposing to build a new elementary school on a piece of public land. It's very close to the existing Beach Street School. Our thought was to build that new elementary school on that adjacent land, which is public land, and then when it's built, empty Beach Street School into that new school. And then our proposition was to demolish Beach Street School and make it the play area that the current piece of land is. But ultimately, that's the alderman's decision. By law, when we stop using a school building, it reverts to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to decide what to do with the school. So like you mentioned, if we talked offline, we can close a school, but we can't go and decide we're going to go build a school on a new piece of land. That has to go before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
So a couple things. First of all, I'm glad that was clarified, because I haven't read that they couldn't pause anywhere in the news. I hadn't heard that yet, and I'm guessing it won't be released for a little bit. But thank you for clarifying that.
It was brought up at our board meeting on Monday night, that in that case I was talking, saying that because I'm one vote on that board, even as the vice chair, I don't have special authority. So I get one vote, and sometimes I win, sometimes I don't. But I was suggesting to my colleagues that we not. They'd also asked that our superintendent and others go before the board, mayor and alderman, and we also rejected that idea. We thought that it would be better, and with their cooperation, we'll have a joint meeting of both boards, which will be healthier and lends itself to open dialogue. Yeah. Of course, it's public. It'll be on public television, but also members of the public will be there. And as I told our new mayor, Mayor Rue, he and I met at length last week after that decision about pauses and everything, and we met at length, and I think we reached a consensus that this was a good way forward. It's not good if people don't understand. We can disagree about how to move forward, as I said earlier, based on politics, outlook, political philosophy, whatever it might be. We probably have different ideas about how to get to a destination, but in order to get there, we need to at least agree the set of facts. And so that's what we're going to attempt to do, and I expect that to be successful.
Yeah, and another thing, before I get into I guess the rundown of what Derry's doing. Derry's school board has their I guess, somewhat their own budgeting authority. The town council does not have to approve the budget, but the voters are the ones. We have something
Right.
called a deliberative session. This year it's going to be in early February.
Right.
But basically the board goes before the public in the gymnasium of West Running Brook Middle School, which is where it is this year, and the public votes on it right there, and the school board's there to answer questions. And the public is allowed to make amendments.
Oh, really?
During the
realize that.
deliberative session.
You know, I remember Derry's not that far away from Manchester for me, and I have a lot of, my wife actually works in Derry, right at her Nichols here in town, so, you know, if anybody goes there, they would know her. But so I'm in Derry often, and so I really remember about 10 years ago, I remember the East Derry Fire Station issue, and I remember the voters, not that I pay close attention, but I noted that in the end, the people of Derry said, no, let's hang on. We don't want that. So I love democracy. It's awkward sometimes. It makes it difficult for some decision making to happen. But you either believe in democracy or you don't, right? So, but I think the challenge, and I don't know, so I'm just my observation from the outside. When we talk in Manchester about making sure that the aldermen have a level set of understanding so that they're able to make a decision, with great respect to the public and how smart people can be, and they are, it's just very difficult when the things are complex. You know, we're a $285 million school district. We have 2,000 employees. Within the Manchester School District, we have 64, 65 nurses. We probably have another 30, 20, whatever, other ancillary medical, mental health, and other staff. So there are lots of small towns in the state of New Hampshire who don't, or hospitals who don't have 65 full-time RNs. We do. We have. We spend between special transportation and bringing kids to school, we spend somewhere around $13 million, $14 million a year on buses. That's a transportation company. You know, if you were running a $12, $13, $14 million business, that's a big business.
Yeah.
So those exist within that structure. I'm only bringing that up, Anthony, because I respect my colleagues on the board of mayor and aldermen, but they're busy trying to run a city, the largest city north of Boston. I mean, Manchester, with all its challenges and all its diversity, but also with all the wonderful things that happen there, it's very hard to be on top of all of that and still be in the minutiae of what's happening in the schools and understanding. That gap has caused tension over time in Manchester with aldermen, with great respect. They just simply don't know what they don't know. One of the sad things about education is that everybody's an expert, right? Everybody either has a kid, well, everybody's been to school themselves, you would hope, or they've had a kid in school or whatever. So everybody thinks, or I have the answer, why don't they? You know, why don't they? If I had $1 for every time I heard, why don't they? Actually, it's not even why don't they, it's more like they should. Like, I don't know anything, but I'm going to say they should really have the schools closed at 3:30, not 2:30. And I'm like, I don't know. Where does that come from? And I respect you, the voters, but I'm just saying it's important for people to spend some time to at least know some of the stuff. I don't know everything, and I do it all day, so to speak, and I find it hard. So with goodwill and people seeking, ultimately, if we're about delivering a great education as best as we can manage and turning out, you know, wonderful young citizens ready to contribute to our society, if that's our goal, then, you know, we should be able to get there even with disagreement.
Yeah, I agree with some of that. Most of that, actually. Shouldn't say some, but
it's all right.
Getting into what's happening in Derry. I've covered this at length on the show, so I won't talk about it too much. But so the rundown is we have 5 elementary schools currently and 2 middle schools. Pinkerton is not in the equation because it's semi-private.
Right.
So the current plan right now is that Derry Village has already been voted to close at the end of this school year. So that'll be closed. And the students will be divided amongst the other 4 schools. They want to close South Range School also. And they would like to close that, I believe, in 2020, the end of the 2026-27 school year. So just like Manchester, actually. Mm-hmm. And they want to build a super school similar to the Beach Street Wilson combination there. And they've kind of run the numbers a little bit. They estimate it'll cost around $72 million with, forget if it was $36 or $46 added per month to taxes. And like I said, they get their own budgeting authority. The
Right.
voters approve their budget, not the town council. If the town council approved it, it would get struck down every year. The
Okay.
town council and our school board are at odds a lot of the time. And
When you say, Anthony, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say $36 per month, is that based on the average house cost, or is that so much per thousand value, or where does that come from?
They had mentioned that the tax impact will be $36 per month added.
Per house?
I believe so.
Okay, but that's also based on the housing value, right? So
Yeah.
a house valued at 200,000 would pay half a house valued at 400,000. But I don't want to be, I don't want to get caught in the minutiae. I'm just wondering because it's an interesting number.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a big number.
It's a big number.
For a town like Derry, it's a very big number. And
Yeah.
obviously it's scared a lot of people, and it has scared a lot of people. Going back a few years, past school boards have considered closing both South Range and Derry Village and Grinnell. The oldest of those schools, by the way, is, I believe, Grinnell was opened in the 50s, so not too old.
Right.
And I think the problem that most people have is that the school board has not properly looked into alternatives. They have not presented a plan for if they were to renovate or if they were to
Right.
gut the schools. And not only have they not looked into it, but they are very hostile toward any citizen that goes up and questions the school board. We were talking on the phone the other day, and obviously there was the major example with the recent public hearing about the new school. An audience member gave the middle finger to the school board after his questions were not answered properly, which I do agree. They dodged all the questions. I agree with him, but obviously you got to be a little courteous. But still, the vice chair of our school board, David Clapp, ran after him and charged at him, looking like he wanted to beat him up.
Wow.
And he only sat down after he noticed that the man's wife, who happens to be a state rep, was filming.
Wow.
So, and I would, similar
Yeah.
to Manchester, it's a big majority of the school board that wants this new school. It's 6-1 majority.
Okay.
So our lone member who doesn't want the schools to close, Brenda Willis, is obviously very upset about it. And I think the situations are very similar because it's a similar time frame, like 26, 27, similar closing,
So we've got, I think, and this is one of the challenges in Manchester was disseminating the information, right, that we talked about already. But we did, the strategic plan was actually key because that's separate from buildings. Like what is your education going to look like, what you need for education? And then the buildings flow from that, right? So if
I may interject,
please.
one interesting thing is that they reached out to companies to help create a master plan after they went forward with all this,
Yeah.
which makes no sense at all.
See, in the case of our school, I know we're running out of time, but in the case of the building of a new Beach Street school in Manchester, we looked at when we closed Wilson Street School, what would it look like to take those children and put those students in 2 of our 12 elementary schools? So the decision, to put it very basically, was do we build an extension on McDonough School and an extension on Beach Street to put half the kids in each of those extensions, or do we build a new McDonough, or do we build a new beach? And ultimately, what it turned out was building an extension on both of those schools was going to be a lot of money anyway. And at the end of it, you'd have a 50, 60-year-old building with a 2020s addition to it. So 50 years from now, you'd have 100 with a, and you'd still be left with the problems of not modernizing the existing schools. So we did look at renovating and building extensions on the 2 schools, and it wasn't a simple decision, but in the end we came down on building a new elementary school. But all those documents are available at MANSD, Manchester School, MANSD.org, and there's a ton of information on the process and on the costings and all that stuff. Maybe 1,000 pages is available on there.
And most of the information about Derry's is also on our school district website. I wanted to read a couple things before we end. We have a member of our school board who is very active on social media, and that's obviously a big red flag right away.
There's a few of those.
Yeah, so I just wanted to read some tweets that he made about Derry. So I actually have to bleep part of this out or else we're going to get cut. So from the school board member, me calculating the amount of caffeine I'll need to continue giving an FUCK about the state of New Hampshire, the State House, and Derry. 100 cups of coffee, 200 shots of espresso, a case of Red Bull, 150 Panera Energy tea, full prescription of Adderall. That's a tweet made by one of our school board members. And I got another tweet that same member made. You see this pin on my jacket? It says, that sounds like BS. It's under the jacket pocket, so when I'm on school board meetings, I can just flip it open and make my point. So I just want to compliment your school board, even though members of your audience disagree with you, and they may be right or wrong.
Right.
You guys don't have people tweeting like this. You don't have vice chairs of your school board trying to beat members of the audience up.
I got to say, there's great hope here, because there was a time in Manchester when there was just about 5 or 6 years ago, and our school board meetings were characterized by ridicule. Our staff would come before our directors, our superintendent, and others. They'd come before the board to ridicule and judgment and self-righteous bloviating, and the voters, at one point, the voters in Manchester eliminated, and I don't want to malign all of them, because there were people who resigned because they were tired of kind of coming to those meetings every 2 weeks. So you can't blame a person, it's hard enough being a public servant without that. But also the voters, in the end, the wisdom of the vote, they did remove the people, a lot of those people. And we're very fortunate today, it might not last forever, we're very fortunate today to have people who at least can respectfully disagree, but having that common, like knowing where you're trying to get to, is the first step. But politics is a pretty divisive enterprise nowadays, and we can all do our best to lower the tone and make it better.
Yeah, I agree. I wish Derry would focus on that. Hopefully, we can work on that in the election on March 12th or 13th, I forget, but it's that Tuesday, so whatever that is. The best way to get most of the information about all this is to just watch meetings, or better, show up. I think you learn more when you show up than just watching on YouTube.
Right.
Because there's a different energy. Like, you can sense people's energy, which in itself is...
And it's live, it's sort of, yeah, absolutely.
So before we end, closing statement, if you want to make one.
Oh, just thank you, Anthony, for having me, and I admire what you do, and I wish, as a young man, I wish I had the drive to do what you're doing. I admire it. I compliment you.
Thank you. I'll certainly be keeping tabs on Manchester. I recommend everyone else in Derry or outside of Derry do the same. I'm Anthony Henry. This has been America's Ask. Thank you for watching.